Hi guys, welcome to week 2. Wanted to make a little video for you guys to talk a little bit about the pre-sentence investigation report and how I use it as a parole agent. So far you've read the PSI is written by the probation officer. So a lot of the times for me as a parole agent, I get called by a lot of probation officers when they are preparing these reports for the court. So because we usually end up having mutual cases or guys and women that have been on probation and then they're also on parole, or they're on parole and they're going back to court and they're trying to decide if they're going to go to probation or going to stay with parole. So some of the information that I provide is whether or not offenders have had any violations while on parole, if they are generally compliant, meaning that they're checking in, that we're doing our home visits, that they're providing urine tests, and what are the results of that, and also whether or not they are employed, if they have stable housing, any mental health concerns. There are a lot of offenders that we get, which we call court walkovers, which basically are individuals that were sentenced to go to prison, but they never actually went to prison. So they never completed the intake process. They completed their sentence in county jail. So we get very little information about them because usually when they come out of prison, they have case plans, they have intake reports. So for those offenders, the probation officer report is very important. So I review that and I try to look at what are some of their history to kind of get like a baseline of where this individual is at. So the better a probation officer report is, the kind of facilitates my job a little bit more because I have a little bit of understanding of this person's background and history. Some of the challenging parts is that a portion of the PSI does require the offender to participate in the interview. So that is where your communication skills come in. So a lot of times now, most probation parole departments, they teach effective communication. Some of you might be familiar with the concept of motivational interviewing, but that's basically asking open-ended questions. So communication skills is going to be very important because you have to speak to a person in a way that is going to make them feel like they want to cooperate. I actually reviewed a probation officer report yesterday where the subject didn't disclose any substance abuse, any mental health concerns, any prior employment. So on the probation report, the probation officer wrote just that subject declined to participate in that interview. When you review the rap sheet and you see that there's multiple drug charges, so even though the offender declined to participate in the interview, so even though an offender might decline to tell you about their substance abuse history, once you review other documents like the rap sheet, then you could see that this person does have a substance abuse history, and so that is a risk area for them. So for me, I use that as one of the sources in order to make conditions of parole, because I could have a parolee that can get out of prison and say, no, I don't have a drug problem. Once I review different source documents, then I'm able to see that no, this person does have a drug issue because they've had multiple arrests, multiple convictions for drug-related charges. Or sometimes it's very important for me. I look at the probation officer report and I look through the circumstances and see if the person was under the influence, because then that is a nexus for me. So a connection, a nexus is a connection of how I can relate convictions to the need for a violation. The narrative portion of the PSI is also very important, because not only does it give the different summaries from the offender, the victim, but it's a concise description of, it's a concise summary of all of the documents found in the court. The narrative section has 3 areas. So the summary and evaluation, the sentencing and recommendation, and then the recommendations for treatment. So all of those are important to, at least for me. When you review the narrative of the PSI, you also get a snapshot of what the county has already done to try to intervene with this person. So a lot of the times the probation officer reports will have a description or a summary of their behavior on probation. In my opinion, the most effective probation officer reports are the ones that are concise and can get all of the information that is needed without being too wordy and just getting straight to the point, especially when you review so many of them. And if any of you have had the opportunity to maybe do an internship or do a ride along or visit a probation officer report and kind of review some files or go to a courthouse, a lot of the documents that are provided to the court are very large packets. The police reports, their rap sheets. I mean, I have some files where it's just hundreds of pages. So being able to concisely condense all that information is very important, because you still want to paint a picture of this person's history, but also provide the information that is needed. So my best recommendation is not only sticking to the training that you will be provided, but also sticking to the basics. So if you look at the way that the class is structured, it's a lot of who, what, when, where, how. If you stick to those, that basic outline, you will be successful in providing the information that you want to say. Next week, in week 3, you guys are going to be going over AB 109. So that was a realignment act, and kind of how that has changed the way that we supervise offenders. So